Thank you, Neil. Good evening, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here with this small but mighty team this evening. And always happy to have the opportunity to share some of the highlights, some of the great work that's happening in and around our schools, particularly during what's been a very busy start to the summer. Tracy, if you wouldn't mind queuing up the presentation. Perfect. I wanted to start with my thanks and appreciation for all the students who have taken part in, and most especially to the faculty and staff and building administrators who have made possible the summer programs that so many of our Tiger students have benefited from so far this summer. It's really heartwarming and gratifying to see how the school year extends, how their learning extends, their interests, their passions, their joys in the experience that they have in our classrooms and in our community extends and doesn't just end at the end of June, but truly is a part of their experience for so many of our students during the summer. So I wanted to thank everyone who was involved in the planning and the implementation of all those wonderful experiences for our students this summer. And wanted to also take some time this evening, and I want to thank Walt Hauser and Sarah Davis from KG&D Architects for being here as well to answer any questions that the board has. Wanted to provide an overview of some of the work of the future facilities planning team, a team of about 30 members of our school district community who have met on 2 occasions so far this summer and have a busy rest of the summer and fall plan to think through, envision, and be able to articulate to our community a plan and a vision for the future of our school facilities in alignment with our broader vision for supporting the whole child. And so you see there, it represented visually that concept of we base our decisions, we base our thinking and our visioning around the needs of our students and really looking to touch upon those 4 hallmarks of what we envision the future of our facilities to be fundamentally about. Of course, supporting and improving the conditions, the infrastructure, the needs that we have to ensure that our schools remain safe places for students and staff to be, and also improvements in how our buildings support teaching and learning, athletics, and the arts. Wanted to make mention and thank all of these folks for giving so much of their time, their talent, their energy, their thinking around this work so far, and thank them in advance for the work that they will continue to do. And I want to make a special mention of my colleague Denise for her outstanding leadership and facilitation of this team going forward and all the work that she's done so far as well. I know that we've had a chance to share this with the board previously, but the repetition, always a good thing when we try to get across messaging. So I think there are really 3 reasons why this is the right time for the district to be engaged in this work. First, that we have health and safety needs related to the physical integrity of our school buildings and property. We talked about the overall value of the properties probably being in the area of $250 million. And so all of the work and the preventative maintenance that gets put into supporting those assets are exceptional and incredible, and a credit to our facilities team and to the leadership of that team. But over the course of time with age comes needs for improvement. And we're at an opportunity now where we're at a place now where that work needs to be strongly considered and done. Additionally, we have that opportunity to align our facilities with the vision that we have in terms of being a future-driven school district and thinking about how our facilities can be responsive to the kind of education, the kind of experiences that we want our students to have as we talk about a 21st century school system. And in addition, and Denise may want to add some color to this, we're at a position now in terms of timing where we're singularly positioned, uniquely positioned to leverage building aid from the state and declining debt with construction phases and financing to minimize the impact of this work on our taxpaying community. Denise, did you want to add any additional details to that?
Just like to say that the declining debt that we will experience in 23-24 is will have a great impact on the tax levy. And the goal is to neutralize that as best we can. And the timing is ideal because we have an opportunity to potentially present a tax neutral project at this point, depending upon the size and the scope. So we will be coming forth with clearer numbers and a more defined scope as we look at the project in the coming months.
And so as we see it, the goals of this team are several, but we really view this potential project as a combination of must-do infrastructure improvements. And Walt, you may want to speak perhaps in broad terms to what some of those are, as well as the opportunity to couple with that some enhancements to improve the student experience and align with that future-driven vision for our schools. And as Denise referenced, develop a proposed project that will minimize the impact on our community's taxpayers. So when we say must-do infrastructure, Walt, did you want to share with the team some of what those concepts are?
Sure. So
Before we do, I think we should introduce Walt Hauser, if it wasn't already done, so we know who he is, from KG&D, and go ahead.
Great, thank you. Well, it's great to be here this evening. The must-do list is exactly what it sounds like. This was the result of a building condition survey process where licensed engineers and architects evaluated through visual observation all of your buildings. And I would say Croton Harman Union Free School District is in a great position because the vast majority of what's on the must-do list is age-related. So when we think about roofs, flat roofs in particular, there's a limited lifespan of that type of system. So we are predicting all of the systems or components that will need replacement within the next 5 to 7 years, let's say 10 years, and things that are aging out. You're in a great position in that you don't have many things that are broken. The school has been taken care of very well. It's code compliant and your systems are fully operational across the board. So this is really about keeping your buildings in good working order going forward so that you're not in a position where you have to address things on an emergency basis where things start to fail. So I would say, just as a compliment to the facilities team in the district, the buildings are in great condition and have been tended to, but these are the things that just require replacement due to age. The biggest tickets on the must-do list are roofs and masonry. So this is repointing masonry, replacing flat roofs that were installed about 20 years ago. That's essentially the warranted useful life of a roof. And then HVAC components that are aging out. You have to remember your buildings span a long history. This building, I think, was built in 1925 with a series of additions over the course of the last 100 years. And not everything is of the same age. So this is addressing the things that are coming to age in the upcoming window.
Thank you, Walt.
Any questions?
So as we think of,
No, I have a question for Denise, but that's after, you want it now or you want to finish?
Whatever you
Okay.
prefer.
Yeah, my question was, Denise, and it's really not so much a question to be answered now, but if we go to the slide 5 with the debt service maturity, what I think we will want to know, the board will want to know in actual figures as we are talking about priorities and projects and trying to balance everything, to get a sense, and I know it's not going to be exact, as to what the decrease in 22, 23, and then to 23, 24 of 1.3 million in debt service, and then another decrease of 500,000 the next year, and another increase of 400,000 or 375,000 year after, means in terms of what we'll call purchasing power, so to speak. Looking at the timeframes for when bonding is going to be done, first bond anticipation notes, and and then full bonding, because I notice a lot of bands are the ones that are dropping off. So we kind of can really think, well, is this a $20 million project? Because that's how it will lay out over time, or a $30 million project, or a $40 million project. So all of which then helps us to think about those specific items, not so much the must-do list, because we know we have to do them, but all the other things that, I guess the exciting things that Steve is about to tell us about.
So Superintendent Walker, in the last slide that you were just on, I think it's 7.
Mhm.
So this timeline allows us to address each of those debt drop-offs. So it would be a combination of bonding and banning in order to balance out those drop-offs. And this timeline here addresses that.
But what I'm saying is not so much that, but to say, all right, if I know that in 2026, our district's debt, if we do a project of $30 million, will be increased from 2.624 million to that level, that's going to be something that we're going to want to figure out so we know exactly what we can afford. And I'm not saying we know that now, but I think when the board discusses this in September and then again in October, that's what we're going to need to know.
So the goal would be to level out that local share over the remaining 10 years or so.
Right.
So we will provide that information. Absolutely.
And I said that as much for everybody, the public and other members of the board, just to understand the process from not just the wish list, but also from the finance.
Right. And we will definitely have to take a long view
Yeah.
in order to accomplish that.
All right.
And I mean, you said it before, like it's trying to figure out what our purchasing power is, right? And I imagine that's a question for our underwriters, that they have to be able.
Bond
Help us.
counsel and our fiscal advisors. Yeah.
kind of- And the goal will be to stabilize that service
Stabilize.
over the foreseeable future.
Right.
So it's a combination of local share, which is the debt service expense and the state aid.
Mhm.
And those two factors accompanied with that schedule will determine the balanced net local share.
Josh, you had a question?
Yeah, so I'm really appreciative of all the committee members that have been part of this process. One thing that I hope will be part of the process when we start, not so much as we talk about the must-dos, those I think are pretty well defined, but as we talk about the want-to-dos, is getting broad input across, it's sort of in the horizontal direction across different disciplines within the schools. That is, the needs for social studies teachers, the needs for English teachers, the needs for science teachers, it's all varied. I think it sort of behooves us to have some, in each building, have some horizontal committee work perhaps, or review to ensure that the needs of all the disciplines are being met.
Yeah, and we recognize certainly that from what the committee has seen so far, which is a walkthrough and summary of some thoughts in this building, as well as similar processes at CET and for Spencer Field, we recognize that there's a big vision here. And of course, between the committee, the board, with input significantly from the community, there's going to have to be a significant amount of winnowing that occurs in order to arrive at a project that can be supported by the community as being fiscally responsible as well. So the next step, just that the board and the community is aware of some of the logistics. So those two meetings, as I've referenced, have already occurred. Next week, the committee will be gathering at PVC to be led by Mr. Plotkin through some of the priorities as initially envisioned by him on behalf of the faculty and the team at PVC. Then later in the month and into early September, there'll be multiple meetings again of the team to start to go through the process of prioritizing some of these potential aspects. And this group with Walt and Sarah will be back in front of the board for the September 1st meeting with an update that will provide significantly more detail once the committee's had a chance to see then the third of our schools and can weigh some of the possible project options. And as this slide lays out, and as Denise mentioned, we anticipate making a recommendation to the board in mid-September, followed by and kind of concurrent with opportunities for the public to weigh in significantly on what they'd like to see from the project leading up to hopefully board consideration formally of this referendum at the second October meeting.
If I may, Denise, perhaps you can explain, and it goes back to the slide, why we are in such an aggressive timeframe. Why that December 10th, I'm sorry, December 13th is the day that we're aiming for a district.
Right.
vote.
So in order to balance that declining debt, we would need to move within, remember, this is a 2-year process. So we're talking about a timeline that is far beyond this. So we have to get SECRA approval. We have to get SED approval. We have to bid the project out. So this is a very long process. So in order to accommodate that, also in consideration of the debt drop off, that we need to move aggressively.
And I think the point being that with the time frame that you were talking about, correct me if I'm wrong, we would be looking to start actual work in the summer of 2024, right?
Correct.
So that means you have to have the approval at the end of 22, and that gives 18 months to do design, get approval from SED, bid contracts, and all the other things to start actually some work, whatever that work is. Josh, you have a question?
I'm not sure who the right person is to answer this question, but what is the current backlog for SE approval for building interior work?
I think that comes to me. So that's a great question. SED is currently struggling with the fiscal advisor position. So they were previously known as the project managers. And there are, I think, currently 1.5 project managers for the entire state. They were able to hire two new fiscal advisors who promptly left. So the simple answer is the technical review right now is about 6 to 8 weeks. So that's the engineering and architectural side, but the fiscal advisor side is significantly lagging behind that. I believe they are still unwinding projects from 2021. So there's a pretty significant backlog, the order of magnitude 20 to 30 weeks in that window. And that's not something that can be currently expedited by third-party review. So that does create some concern for us in the schedule, but we do believe that the 18-month window of design, permitting, bidding, and award before construction will give us enough leeway to make that happen.
Well, can you just explain what the fiscal advisor part of that is? Because I'm familiar with the architectural
Sure.
review.
Sure.
What are they looking at?
Yeah, so
Approved.
the review is split into 2 categories. The technical review, as you mentioned, they're looking at code-related issues concerning the building. So fire safety, building code requirements. The fiscal advisors are looking at the administrative side of the application, which would include information regarding your source of financing, your preliminary building aid analysis, and the administrative side of the project.
Question. You mentioned engagement of the public throughout. Can you just, do you have a sense of the framework for that and kind of touch points when, throughout the planning and execution, et cetera, how that would work out?
Yeah, so we're envisioning putting together kind of a subcommittee of that group to focus specifically on the messaging and the community engagement, but I'm envisioning a combination of video opportunities as well as in-person tours of the spaces led by members of that team. In addition, probably some broader opportunities for the public to come together in larger numbers to hear from us directly about the vision for the project and ask questions and have them answered in those sorts of forums as well. I think it's really critical that, and specifically based on some of the feedback we've gotten from the committee, that members of the public have the opportunity to see the spaces that our students are learning in now. And I think the product in terms of the quality of the education is fantastic and staggering when you think about the age of the spaces in which some of these teaching and learning opportunities are happening.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
Before we go on, Molly, you are, I know, a member of the planning team. Just wondering if you, from a student perspective, have any comments, any questions, anything that you're thinking about? Now, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I like.
But he just
I like
did.
to hear what I just did.
I mean, so far, so far as the committee, the team, we've toured the high school and the elementary school. And I've loved seeing, but I loved seeing all the ideas that they have for both of the schools. I mean, obviously, I'm a high school student right now. And it was really nice and like kind of nostalgic to tour elementary school. And yeah, I mean, right now, I just think that there are a lot of good ideas out there. And I think, if a lot of this stuff gets approved, that it can really help the students sort of, and I think it can hopefully, I think the goal of a lot of the stuff that's not the necessary stuff, that's not the necessary updates for the buildings that the the renovations are trying to do, is just trying to make like the school buildings themselves more of a place like that don't just exist for students to learn in, but like can help students more with their learning. And I think that if and when a lot of the ideas get approved, that hopefully it will help students that way.
Well said, Molly. Thanks, Jonathan.
If there is nothing else, we will look forward as a board to see Walter and Sarah in 4 weeks and the work of the planning team until then. So let us move on to new business. First item is 3.1. Recommended action that the Board of Education approves the side letter of agreement between the Croton Harman CTA, Croton Teachers Association, and the Croton Harman School District as presented. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, on question? All right, hearing no comment, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions, motion carries 5-0. Item 3.2. Recommended action that the Board of Education approves the side letter of agreement between the Croton Harman School District and the Croton Harman Administrators Association as presented. I have a motion.
So moved.
I have a second.
Second.
On the question? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries 5-0. Item 3.3, Croton Academy of Arts lease agreement. Recommended motion that the Board of Education approves the 2022-2023 lease agreement between Croton Harman Union Free School District and the Croton Academy of Arts beginning September 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2023. The tenant, that is the Croton Academy of Arts, shall pay the landlord, Croton Harman School District, $2,500 per month in accordance with the terms and conditions outlined in the lease agreement. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Hey, Mary. Okay. Any discussion? Okay,
It's the question. So this is from September through June. What happens in July and August?
This after-school program, this is only for the after-school
Just,
program.
Anybody else? Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions, motion carries 5-0. Subject, item 3.4, tax warrant, Croton Harman Union Free School District, 2022-2023. Recommended action that the board approves 2022-2023 tax warrant for the Croton Harmon Union Free School District as presented. And because this is what is utilized for the assessment of taxes for the district, I will read it. Whereas the voters of the Croton Harmon Union Free School District have approved the 2022-2023 school budget in the amount of $52,672,111. And whereas the Board of Education has estimated its 2022-2023 state aid receivable in the amount of $7,557,123. And whereas the Board of Education has estimated that its 2022-2023 non-tax revenues will be in the amount of $8,263,623, which includes the state aid of $7,557,123. And whereas the Board of Education authorizes applying $1,787,146 from the undesignated fund balance and $400,000 from the employee retirement reserve to the reduction of the tax levy. And therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education confirms the tax rolls as per the attached documents and hereby approves the attached 2022-2023 tax warrant in the amount of $42,221,342 and commands each town's tax collector to collect the amounts of the levy apportioned at the tax rates calculated in the Appendix A attached to the tax warrant beginning September 1st, 2022 and ending June 30th, 2023. Giving the tax warrant an effective period of 304 days. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any questions or comments on the tax warrant? For the district? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 5-0. Now we'll move to item 3.5, tax warrant for the library. Recommended action that the Board of Education approves the 2022-2023 tax warrant for the Croton Free Library as presented. I will read that as well. Whereas the voters of the Croton Harmon School District have approved the 2022-2023 Croton Free Library budget in the amount of $972,450. And whereas the Croton Free Library has estimated its 2022-2023 non-tax revenue in the amount of $56,589, and therefore be it resolved, separate resolution, that the Board of Education confirms the tax rolls as per the attached documents and hereby approves the attached 2022-2023 tax warrant in the amount of $915,861 and commands each town's tax collector to collect the amounts of the levy apportioned at the tax rates calculated in the Appendix A attached to the tax warrant beginning September 1st, 2022 and ending June 30th, 2023, giving the tax warrant an effective period of 304 days. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
On the motion, any discussion and questions?
None other than my renewed irritation at the fact that school districts sit in decision on library matters. It's my opinion that libraries should have their own independent boards separate from school boards. But that would require changes in New York State law, which I hope that will happen eventually.
And I will also note that there are school district libraries, there are free libraries, there are town libraries, and under the state educational and otherwise. Nobody knows why they really are that way, but that's the way they are.
It's history.
So, is there anything else? Any other comments? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 5-0. Item 3.6, co-curricular recommendations. That the Board of Education, recommended action of the Board of Education approves the 2022, 2023 co-curricular appointments as presented. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
On the question? Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Aye. All opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the passes 4-0 with 1 abstention, Mr. Diamond. Item 3.7. Recommended action that the Board of Education approves the 1-year emergency 2022, 2023 food service management contract with Aramark as presented. Do I have a motion?
So move.
For a second.
Second.
Question, on any questions? Because I have one. Resolution says emergency food service management contract. Nathan, can you explain why why it is an emergency?
Sure. So the Office of Child Nutrition Services at the State Education Department is the governing agency that oversees the bid and awards for food service management. And due to COVID, they have offered a 1-year emergency contract extension, which they did as well last year. However, this year we were able to negotiate additional measures through Aramark, and through that negotiation, we have agreed upon a meal rate, which is significantly lower than previous years for both our breakfast program and our school lunch program. So this year, through this contract, we were able to renegotiate the rate without going to a formal bid. So it was a very good process for us in that we didn't have to go to formal bid, which we will need to do in 23-24. But Aramark has shown their commitment to the district and their desire to continue here. And they came in with a very favorable meal rate for the district. So that fund, the C fund, our cafeteria fund, which has been operating in a significant deficit since the beginning and inception of the program, it looks as though we are now coming out of our initial phase, and we may have the opportunity, if not this year, next year through the formal bid to recover some of that loss and hopefully come into a profitable state for that fund.
Josh. And then Dale.
Okay, I noticed that the contract that's attached in the agenda has several lines that are redacted.
That comes from the State Education Department. So instead of revising the contract, they just redacted it. This is generated through the State Education Department.
So there isn't some part of the contract that's just hidden. It's that those are actually struck out.
Struck out by the State Education Department, yes. That's not redacted by us.
You said the rate was lower this time than last time. And
Yes.
do you have a sense of how that was achieved?
It was just looking at our past history. So when Aramark came on board, when we started our school lunch program about 3 years ago, they had no idea what the usage was going to be in our schools. So the average daily participation was a guesstimate. So now we have 3 years, during 2 of which were actually 2.5 years were during COVID, but we still had very strong numbers. So there was profitability for Aramark, not for us, because the original rate that was proposed was high because it was a startup and they had no idea about how, how many students were going to participate in the program. So now they have 2.5 to 3.5 years of data, and they were able to project better. Now, again, this year, we've been with 2 years with free lunch for all students. This will be, nothing has been straightforward since the beginning of the program. But this year, they are not, the state and the federal government are not continuing free meals for all. So our participation levels are likely to decline. And even factoring that in, they were able to reduce the rate significantly.
Does this mean you'll be continuing the breakfast program?
We are going.
Okay, because I don't know if you had that before COVID or not. but,
We did
for
not have
everybody,
it before COVID,
Okay,
but we will be continuing that program.
it's a great way for the kids to start their day.
It is, and it's been a very successful program, especially at CET.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, if not, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? None, 5-0. Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is instructional personnel. Item 4.1. Instructional personnel, unpaid leave of absence. The recommended action that the Board of Education approves the unpaid leave of absence for Qi Zhang, if I'm Qi, sorry, I didn't take Mandarin, PVC Mandarin teacher from August 30, 2022 through January 31, 2023.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Nope. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carried. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Recommended action that the Board of Education approves all of the items under the consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
On the question? Anybody have any questions about what is on the consent agenda, any of the items? If not, then we'll proceed to a vote. All those in favor of adopting the consent agenda or approving the consent agenda?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries 5-0. We will move on to the section called closing of the meeting. This is the opportunity for the second hearing of the public. If any member of the public desires to speak to the board, now is the opportunity for a period of up to 3 minutes. And we ask any member of the board who desires to speak to follow our civility policy that is set forth on the wall to the right of the podium.
Ed Riley from Truesdale Drive. One of the areas that this board and the school district will constantly get in trouble with is when they deal with critical race theory. You call it equity training. Critical race theory and equity training were designed by David Kirkland and the racist out of NYU in the state curriculum, passed down to you. The assistant superintendent has dedicated himself to making every student an activist. Now, I'm sure you're not dedicated to make them pro-life activists, Second Amendment activists, people like that. You're dedicated to making them left-wing activists. This is a left-wing town. And you have a majority. But 1/3 of this town is not left-wing. And most of the people, or at least half the voters, do not participate in this school district at all. So you have another constituency you have to deal with. those taxpayers and 1/3, maybe even more of your student body, and certainly 1/3 in taxpayers. In dealing with Kirkland, watching his seminars, which I participated in, one of the accusations against Kirkland and your other two consultants was they were Marxists, which they are. They're Marxists. And one of the teachers, a doctor from New York City, said, you know, you may get more traction with your theories if you cut out the anti-capitalist, anti-free enterprise aspect of your philosophy. So everything you do, this school district does with CRT/equity is suspect. You've already had to amend it. Two of your most long-lived members have said, we will not lower standards. Like entire states said, you don't have to be competent, entire states, in mathematics and English to graduate from high school. Only 15% of high school graduates in the state of California have that, meet that requirement if you're a person of color. So the lowering, you've already said we're not going to lower standards. That's a violation of this basic CRT premise. You also say you're not going to indulge in anti-Semitism because CRT tends to get over into that Palestinian-Israeli conflict and because it becomes anti-Semitic. So you have serious problems with your equity in CRT because of one, the consultants you selected. And then when you get into restorative justice, you're now flirting with the problems that 3 of these major shooting incidents had in their school districts, including the one in Buffalo. He did not do it in a school, but he was dealt with in school poorly. And so thankfully, so far, in terms of what was articulated, the gentleman who is the biggest advocate of restorative justice does not think that crime should not be reported and should be dealt with. But we have serious worries about what you will do with restorative justice.
Thank you, Mr. Ryder. Is there anyone else who desires to speak to the board? Seeing none, we will move on to the next item regarding related to closing of the meeting. Board reports. There is one report listed on the agenda, and that has to do with advocacy, which I will speak to, but unfortunately, the thing that I printed out, I don't know where it went, but it doesn't really matter that much. Advocacy. Last week, after the board submitted to NYSBA resolution for relating to 2 matters. One was the harmonizing the dates for filing of petitions for candidates for the position of school trustee, because there are union-free school districts, common school districts, central school districts, city school districts, and there are discrepancies in how those, what those deadlines are. Most notably, that city school districts have a 20-day deadline prior to the election for the filing of petitions, while our district has a 30-day deadline, such that, you know, that's an accident of history. It's never, I don't think, been looked at. And it is the resolution in part that we submitted asks for NYSBA to advocate with the legislature to harmonize those dates. That resolution was included with another resolution, or another part of the resolution, which we had discussed as a board, which relates to the timeframe for dealing with situations in which a member, an individual who has petitioned and submitted sufficient petition signatures to be on the ballot subsequently withdraws. Right now, what the law says is that if someone withdraws after a petition is submitted, the district must reopen petitioning and allow 15 days for new petitions to be filed with an absolute drop dead deadline of 7 days before the vote. The problem, and this was brought to our attention by our district clerk, is that there are a lot of issues that come with such a short deadline. The first is that under the law, absentee ballots must be mailed to members serving in the military, residents serving in the military, 25 days before the election. So if there is a petition and the person withdraws a new petition, the ballots will already be gone. It takes a couple of weeks to print the machine readable ballots for use in our voting machines, which by law we are required to use under the Help America Vote Act. And so if there is a withdrawal of a candidate and new petitioning for new candidates, we're now in a situation in which we have printed the ballots and we have to throw them away and print another set of ballots. We also have to print new absentee ballots, whether they are done on a photocopy machine, as we do in our district, or printed by an outside printer. So the question, the resolution that we submitted, and this resolution was reviewed and approved by the Advocacy Committee, which was Sarah, myself, and Mary, and then was also passed by the other members of the board for comment, would have the NISBA approve, advocate for changing those deadlines or changing the process for filling a vacancy that occurs on a ballot when someone withdraws in a way that makes sense administratively and is fair to the voters, particularly the voters who are going to be voting by absentee ballot. NISBA contacted Tracy and me the other day and said, we want to split those into two resolutions, even though they are connected or related, but they said they wanted to split them into two resolutions. And unless the board sees any objection to that, and that's what NISBA is going to ask when they meet, as the resolutions committee meets on August 18th, I will contact, I'll take a look at them, massage them as needed, and then send it back to NISBA. And so that's my report on behalf of the Advocacy Committee. And beyond that, any questions? Josh, I see you have one.
Yeah, my only question is, are there any oddities that would occur if if action were to happen on one, if legislation were to be changed, be enacted concerning one of the resolutions and not the other?
No, because if all the dates for filing of petitions are harmonized 30 days beforehand or whatever date is appropriate, that can stand alone.
Okay.
And if there is an issue regarding how and what the deadline should be for filling or for allowing re-petitioning after a candidate withdraws, that
You feel that that's sufficient?
they're sufficiently, I mean, they're related because they're the same subject, right? But petitioning, but
You don't envision any.
but I don't envision an issue of
oddities
inconsistency if one passes and not the other.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Anyone else? Okay. Any other board reports? Any other committees? I think at this point, our committees really have not done a whole lot of work in the 2 or 3 weeks since we made our committee assignments, but we will, I'm sure, be working on that. Hearing of the, I'm sorry, not hearing, polling of the board. Any issues or questions regarding polling of the board that anybody wants to raise at this point? I will raise one just for information for the board and information for the public, which is the village board has on their work session agenda, I believe, a proposal for erecting a cell tower at 230 Hessian Hills Road, which is up near Temple Israel. And I don't know, I don't think the district is taking any position, or the board is taking any position on that. I just note that since there are dead zones in various parts of the village, if that cell tower is ultimately constructed, that may have some positive impact on cell service in parts of the village. I don't know if it would have any impact on our campus, either here at the high school and middle school with CT, but that is just something we should keep our eye on.
To be clear, that proposal calls to remove the existing 75-foot mast, replace it with a 100-foot mast, and put cellular antennas on at the top of the now taller mast, together with the emitters that are already there that the village uses for their internal communications. I think police and fire and municipal services use it. One of the things that I would love to hear from the village, or frankly, is whether any study has been done as to whether that will actually improve coverage in the biggest problem areas, which in many ways is like Spencer Field and parts of the school buildings. It'd be really nice to see if it's actually going to have an impact. 25 feet is a significant change. Hopefully it will help.
Well, and I think,
But whether it necessary, but not necessarily, but it may not be sufficient. And I think that regardless of whether that happens, as a board, we may want to continue to explore what we need, what needs to be done to ensure that we have good cellular coverage in places that keep our students and our staff and faculty safe.
two observations that I have. First is, Josh, I think you're absolutely right, although I don't know much about the technology as to whether, if there is a taller tower, there are other things that we can incorporate into our buildings here and at CET, like repeaters or enhancers,
Repeaters,
whatever they
mobile.
are.
You know, there are school districts that sell antenna space on their buildings.
Yep.
It works well because it can be a source of revenue. And it also improves the coverage and safety around the buildings. There could potentially be pushback just as the village is experiencing. But it is something that some districts have done. The struggle is often, I believe this goes back, I think it was my first or second year on the board, so that's like 8 years ago. The district did reach out at some point relative to this to cellular companies and basically couldn't get anybody to answer the phone to even respond on it. But there is a member of the community that's reached out and mentioned that if we're interested in that sort of thing, they may be able to help us, but they've had some experience with it. And I can provide that contact to the district administration if it becomes, if it's thought useful.
Well,
Of course, that would be, if the village is going ahead with their tower, I think and it does actually get constructed, we should probably try to understand what the impact is. And I think that's a good question for the district. And it is something that the tower company should be able to provide to the district, to the village, perhaps at the request of the district, to indicate what areas will now have coverage, will be in what areas will be in line of sight to the new tower that are not currently in line of sight to the tower. And that is something they should be able to print out out of their systems pretty easily.
Two other observations. The first is that the other thing that we probably should find out from our transportation department is, are there areas within the village or nearby, such as, on
Call up
Colorado
on road.
Pond, where that's a problem for our transportation, for our drivers, because they do communicate sometimes using radios, but also communicate using cell phones, and whether that improvement is something that, that
Could potentially.
could
so.
help in that regard. And the other thing that I'm thinking
We have
about,
our own tower, I believe, at the transportation. building, right?
well, we don't have, not at the transfer, there is a tower near,
Yeah.
right past that, which was constructed probably 12, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
But the other question that I'm thinking about, and maybe this is sacrilege, is one of the things that we had been talking about is, if this improvements to Spencer Field that the facilities, future facilities planning team is looking at and will be proposed, includes lighting at Spencer Field, whether, as part of that, there might be some way to work in some kind of tower or arrangement that could help.
Build a couple of the masts a little bit taller so you can, on spec.
Yeah.
With the idea that there'll be space on them for the cellular.
And I don't know if that's something that can be done. I don't know if something that tower
It's
companies will want to do, but,
Yeah, then this member of the public might get that.
Good.
He has the contacts, which is one.
In the short term, just to follow, Mr. Healy and I did have an initial conversation about this. He asked for some additional time to provide some clarity about what the potential impact would be. So let me follow up with him, see if I can get something in writing that I can share with the board.
anything else for Poland? Items needed for the next Board of Education meeting. Next Board of Education meeting will be the 18th. And the topic is goals, district goals, which of course will follow up also with board goals. So that's kind of what's on our plate for August 18th. And if there's something else that is needed for August 18th or for September 1st, next business meeting, let's figure it out.
One thing, I'm not sure if it's an item needed for the next board meeting, but I think that now's the time we should all be thinking about when our next committee meetings should be. I think that for the next business meeting, we probably ought to know who the committee chairs will be.
Mhm.
We know who's on each committee, but we did not say anything about who would chair each of them. I think that's something that we should probably discuss before the next business meeting.
Which would mean that we should all take out our calendars, those of us who
Oh, I don't
have
think we have enough.
committees, no, who have committees, I'd say take it out in public here.
Okay.
Take them all out and let's figure out when we can, each of our committees can convene for the first time. I will tell you, which I guess I should, as part of board reports, is that the advocacy committee is scheduled to meet on Tuesday, August 16th. Right, and that's Sarah, Mary, and me. So those other committees, let's start looking at our calendars and figure out who
I
our
got the list.
chair are. Oh, so that's another question on polling. I should go back to, and that is the NISBA convention. The NISBA convention is October 27, 28, 29, which is Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or Thursday, Friday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, that last weekend. I will say that I have made arrangements to go, Sarah's made arrangements to go, Mr. Walker's made arrangements to go. At this point in time, if you want to go, the best thing might be to bring a tent, because according to Tracy, they've booked all the rooms, but fortunately, because Tracy is so on it and intrepid, those who have signed up to go, I think all have rooms somewhere. If you are interested, let Tracy know as soon as possible, and we'll see, if there's any place, if there's any room at the inn, so to speak.
Syracuse in the fall. I can't wait.
Well, the one thing that I will tell you, I'll tell you, I don't care, is that the 29th, that Saturday, it's Syracuse versus Notre Dame in the Carrier Dome.
That's why all the hotel rooms are full.
Well, no, that's a lot of the reason why they are full. So, but, keep in mind that if, I'm not looking to go to the Carrier Dome, but, if you're a college football
All right.
fan, you want to
Write that
like
down,
Notre
sir.
Dame,
Thank you.
maybe it's an excuse. Anything else? Okay, if there is nothing else, then we can move to adjourn if people so wish. If you want to go home instead of talking.
So moved.
Second, no, very, very second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. I had 8:07, if I'm not mistaken.
So it says right there.
All right, we're done. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well done, sir.
Theo, don't leave.